Anyhow, it is bad timing, and also it is, you can see very clear pattern of asymmetry. More panelists and smaller audience. Anyhow, today it's so beautiful to be inside. Anyhow, I will start regardless of size of the audience, but because we will be recording these sessions so that we can use it for educational purposes. Even though audience is small, let me introduce each of panelists here. We have Professor Nodari Simonia from Russia. He was the president of IMEMO, and he's the academician of the Russian Academy. Let's give a big applause to Nodari. And we have General Pan Jung-chan. Okay. He appears in the other session too, and General Pan has been one of the most renowned spokesmen of Chinese national security policy abroad. Let's give a big applause to General Pan. And also, you all know Ambassador Byung Se-yoon. He was the senior secretary to the president for national security and foreign affairs during the Nominhan government. And he was also minister at the Korean embassy in Washington, D.C. And he is now visiting professor at Seogang University. Let us give a big applause to the Byung Se-yoon. I would say that Byung Se is the #1 specialist in America, particularly American foreign policy, and he has been most sincere and respected, the diplomat in Washington. And also now let me turn to then Charles Morrison, who is the president of East-West Center. It is very rare president of East-West Center would appear in this kind of panel. There is no audience, given the outstanding status of East-West Center in this part of the world. But anyhow, c'est la vie. What can we do? Anyhow, let us give a big applause to the Charles Morrison. And finally, but not least, is Professor Charlie Park of Seoul National University. He's one of the best Japan specialists in South Korea. It's very wonderful, but anyhow, Charlie was picked up at last moment because, in fact, we invited Kawaguchi, former foreign minister of Japan, and initially she said yes, but the Japanese diet would not allow, including Hatoyama, and both, Professor Bakchari, arranged in a visit by Hatoyama and Kawaguchi, but therefore, since Kawaguchi-san couldn't attend, therefore Bakchari should take her position and also give a Japanese perspective. And this setting is like, six-party talk without North Korea, okay? And also let me just give one more point about Jeju process. When President Nominhan was still in office, that is 2 years ago, in fact, it's 4 years ago, 2007, we held fourth Jeju Peace Forum. And in that forum, we adopted a document called the Jeju Process. Jeju Process is all about applying European model, particularly Helsinki process model, to Northeast Asia. But at the time, the scholars and policymakers who attended the fourth Jeju Peace Forum all agreed that it is doable, it is possible. Then we adopted the document, and we have been trying to apply it, but the problem is the current government, it appears to me, the current government doesn't pay attention to, multilateral, security, cooperation regime. The current government tend to emphasize the importance of alliance with the United States. Even though there was a lesser degree of attention from the government, if we have a new government in 2 years, the new government may pay attention to the idea of multilateral security cooperation regime within six-party talk process or apart from the six-party talk processes. What I will do is this. I will invite each of you to give 3 to 5 minutes presentation on your own personal view, but I hope that you would reflect the country you are from, okay? And you can blend government position and with your own personal view, 3 to 5 minutes, and then after that, I'll raise several questions to you and open the session to the floor. And we'll start with Professor Nodari Simonia.
Thank you, Professor Moon. My opinion about this architecture of security regime practically can be described by just one word: fragmentation. The characteristic feature of this, especially in Northeast Asia, but not only, the most characteristic feature is a kind of fragmentation. There is no, for me at least, no vision of the nearest future creation, in nearest future creation of this multilateral security regime. And why? Because, you know, you are used comparison with European countries, but for me it's not acceptable. Practically, it was absolutely different geopolitical situation in Europe when Europe started building this security system, and today in Asia, East Asia or Northeast Asia. What was the main factor in Europe? Everybody are saying that there were clever guys, Schuman, Adenauer, and sometimes you are calling also de Gaulle. But I am sure that in Asia there are also very clever guys, maybe not less clever than Schuman. But the problem is that general atmosphere and general situation and geopolitical situation is absolutely different. It was post-war time. Europe was in ruins. There was a influence of left forces in many countries, important countries. Communists were participants in many governments, in France especially. In Greece, there was a whole war. And if not, Great Britain sent its troops to Greece to help against resistance forces, then nobody knows where will be Greece that time, on which side. So this was America who decided that it is worth saving right now Europe from disaster, and first step was Marshall Plan. And Marshall Plan helped a lot to restart economic process in European continent. Second, creation of NATO. And not less important was existence of USSR. Because it was not direct influence, but hidden menace. Practically, there was a serious menace because Soviet Union was also in ruins, and it took several years to take out from these ruins because of the despotic regime of Stalin. And still, Europe was afraid of USSR. That's why it was so willing to participate in such a regime. I don't see today in Asia that kind of situation. There is not such a menace like USSR was. And I am always putting question, security structure from whom? Where is a menace? Big menace, not just a simple menace. But at the same time, and I'm finishing up, I am not monopolizing the scene, the problem is also that I started with fragmentation. America was going to overcome this fragmentation many people remember that America created Seattle, CENTO, ANZUS, and many other efforts was made under their dominance. But it failed. It absolutely failed. And then next stage of America's diplomacy was bilateral military political alliances with Japan, with South Korea, with Taiwan. So all these things, I think, prevent to repeat just a model, European model. Okay.
Well, I try to use 3 words to characterize the process of community building in Northeast Asia, if we want to put this exercise on the right and sustained track. The first word I emphasize is reconciliation. Now, if you look at the present state of affairs in Northeast Asia, trust deficit, in fact, is the most serious roadblock on our way towards community building. I just imagine if Northeast Asia could also see some kind of reconciliation like that between Germany and France. And when I see that countries in this region no longer regard the state relations as a game of zero-sum nature and not, in fact, contaminated by the history burdens, and then I think that we will be far better off for the community building. Now, what do we mean by reconciliation? I think that, first of all, perhaps we'll have to acknowledge that we have to resort to a peaceful approach towards resolving our differences or even confrontation. And also, reconciliation perhaps also means that countries would have to live together with each other in peace, in the spirit of mutual respect and a mutual benefit. I think reconciliation also suggests a kind of tolerance that each country would have towards other countries in terms of their differences in political value, in political systems, and so on and so forth. Now, this region, in fact, is so rich in divergences. You cannot demand just a kind of a single kind of version of value or whatever belief. So countries must learn to live together to solve their problems and for their common goods. Now, the second word, as I would emphasize, is inclusiveness. Not simply because this region is so divergent, as I said. We must have a broad participation. You cannot see that one power group can dominate a kind of security architecture. As I see it, Northeast Asia is perhaps heading more rapidly than any other parts of the world towards multipolarity. So some of our colleagues suggest a kind of a shift of power balance. I might not use that word, but I just want to say that the countries now, particularly in the post-Cold War era, countries are trying to seek in a new way of cooperation based on, as I said, mutual benefits. And therefore, community building will not only involve the countries in this region, but perhaps also will have to engage the United States, because that country is so important, for better or for worse, for the progress of community building. But I would also argue that broad participation must also include North Korea. Don't think it is just kind of maverick, just as a kind of, a sort of country different from others, and therefore they must be excluded, or demand that they must change before they participate. I think that perhaps are the wrong way. So the challenge is how our community building would engage North Korea would be a very important kind of exercise. And therefore I wonder, next time when Jeju conference or Jeju process next year to see the participation of North Korea, and I will be more than happy. And I think that will be a kind of breakthrough in the right direction. Now the third word I want to emphasize is institutionalization. Just like a Helsinki process, just like a European community building, we must have a sort of institutionalization process. Now, in my perspective, six-party talks perhaps are quite ideal kind of process on the first track. But of course, it much depends on the progress of denuclearization of North Korea. Now, in China's intention, six-party talks, in fact, not only provide a kind of platform for the solution of nuclear issues, but build on that process, the progress, six-party talks perhaps could also provide a very, very conducive, useful venue for multilateral security cooperation, economic cooperation. And therefore, I think that this is very good platform for all the countries concerned to get together to solve their problems. But as we see, it is so difficult, you see, to achieve progress. And therefore, I would argue that perhaps pending the progress of the official track of a community building, we badly need a kind of a non-official process of community building. And that's where Jeju process could play its role. It's the most ideal kind of a venue, a tool towards building consensus or pushing for the promotion, for the progress of the first track kind of community building. And I said that Jeju process is most perfect, I would say the perfect kind of model, because South Korea in this exercise, in fact, could play a unique role, a role of leadership. China doesn't like to see the leadership of the United States or Japan or any other country. And perhaps the United States, and I don't want to see the role of China as a leader. So given the geographical location, given the rising economic and political strength, and given its unique relations with the United States, with China, and even with North Korea, and I think that South Korea, in fact, and particularly Jeju, could play that role. And I hope that this process will continue. Thank you very much.
General Pan, thank you very much, and thank you really very much. Thank you very much for your encouraging remarks. And Ambassador Yoon, you are one of the architects of President Roh Moo-hyun's foreign policy, and particularly about this multilateral, security cooperation regime, six-party process, and etc. What is your take on General Pan's view?
But I come back to that later. But given this opportunity, Let me start with what I have prepared for kind of overview. Actually, yesterday, Prime Minister Kim set a very interesting tone for today's topic. His remarks tend to represent the current thinking of this government on where we are and how we should go from here. But at the outset of this discussion, we may have to pause for a little while to look back, to think about how much we have achieved in the past. Actually, for the last 3 decades, there has been a lot of debate on this regional security cooperation in this Northeast Asian region, as well as in the East Asian region. There are many proposals made by several governments, including South Korea. But the most serious and action-oriented efforts were made by six-party talks. And that resulted in a very interesting two documents. One is the September 19th joint statement and February 13th action program of 2007. This package deal was in essence that if we make progress in denuclearization of North Korea, then we can make progress on other fronts as well, including the discussion of Northeast Asian peace and security mechanism. Paradoxically, the most destabilizing development, the most unwelcome development in this region became a trigger for regional security consultation beyond the North Korean nuclear issue to much expanded regional agenda. So at least we had the roadmap as well as the vision in this joint statement and action program. Specifically, we have a very interesting provision in this joint statement. If I quote and unquote, it said, six-party talks will promptly hold a ministerial meeting to explore ways and means to promote security cooperation in Northeast Asia. And this statement was followed up by several key figures in the region, including Condi Rice, Secretary Clinton, and President Roh Moo-hyun, and others. So at least during the year of 2007, there were some hopes and expectations to realize this vision and translate that into real actions. And also there was some working level meetings to follow up this joint statement under the chair of Russia, what they call Working Group on Northeast Asian Peace and Security Mechanism. They met 3 times until early 2009. But now, due to these North Korean nuclear problems and provocations by North Korea, everything became history, at least for the time being. The question I have to ask myself, or ask yourself, is 2 things. Number 1 is the linkage question. Should we realistically start track 1, regional cooperation dialogue among the 6-party talks without any progress in North Korea's denuclearization? My answer right now is negative. Denuclearization is at the center of the whole deal. And a Northeast Asian peace and security mechanism should be pursued in a way which is consistent with and conducive to the progress of North Korean nuclear issues. But on the other hand, with the progress in North Korean nuclear issues, we can expect parallel movements as well as the European experience like CSCE or OSCE. This OSCE process of fostering security and economic cooperation through parallel baskets could be tailored to Northeast Asia in earnest, so that North Korea can receive tangible benefits, and also thereby to reassure the North that it can survive without nuclear weapons. The next question is, what kind of format, especially given the frustration expressed by Professor Moon, should we simply sit down, should we simply wait, doing nothing, while this nuclear stalemate is ongoing? My answer is no. I think regional countries can start some discussions on regional agenda other than North Korean nuclear issue. This is not for the purpose of alienating North Korea, but because of the necessity of starting various forms of the dialogues, either unilateral or plurilateral, to build confidence. So I think one good example is trilateral summit among Korea, Japan, and China, which was mentioned by Prime Minister Kim yesterday. At least that summit is supposed to discuss many non-traditional security issues, as well as economic integration, including the vision of a common market. I think in moving forward, we need to take into account several factors. Briefly, I think number one is, yes, we have some lessons to learn from the European experience, but we have to adapt those lessons to unique Northeast Asian environment. Secondly, the relationship between Northeast Asia and East Asia. I think those two regions' efforts should move in parallel. That should not be a zero-sum game. Thirdly, the speed. We have to move rather at a comfortable pace. You don't have to rush. Fourthly, reality check. In terms of realpolitik, we need to have a very stable relationship among regional actors, especially among big powers. And fifthly, I think this multilateral security architecture is not supposed to replace bilateral relationship. Those two concepts should not be mutually exclusive. Finally, as regards General Pan's the remarks, yes, Korea has some role, a bridging role between these big powers or small powers in East Asia, and also as a major party to this Korean nuclear question and the problems. So we have a very important role to play. But basically, I think this multilateral regional cooperation in this Northeast Asian region should take into account the progress in North Korean nuclear issues for the time being, but still we should continue the efforts for consultation on the regional agenda with patience. Thank you.
Charles?
Okay, I think I'm going to agree with much of what has already been said, but I kind of separated my comments into three areas. And one is what we need, what we have, and then finally what Jeju can do about this. And I think when we look at Europe, we're really looking at what Europe has that Asia doesn't have. And so maybe, even though you can't adapt it very specifically, there's something there. And the main thing I've always thought is really the vision. And the vision, what happened in Europe in the last 60 years is that people growing up, at least in Western and parts of Central Europe, can't even imagine their countries at war anymore. And that's not something that is true yet of this region. This still, much of the politics of this region, including even the trade politics, are characterized more by strategic competition among nations than a common undertaking. And so I think that's very important. And then I think looking at Helsinki, the inclusive geography that General Pon mentioned, arched across the two alliance systems in Europe, the comprehensive set of issues. So you had the three baskets of politics, security, economics, and values. You had a set of principles, and so there was norm building. It couldn't be dominated by any one country, and it couldn't be upset by any one country. It was, even though it had a lot of players, I think 35 or something, it was small enough to do things because there was a central conflict in Europe, and it was flexible and adaptable. And so when the Cold War ended, in a new guise, it has continued to play a role. And of course, it wasn't the only part of the architecture. There are many other institutions. Now, what do we have? We've had for more than 20 years now, APEC, quite institutionalized, regular meetings, but it's large. We expanded it too fast when we brought in Taiwan and Hong Kong, and that meant it was impossible to address political security issues directly. And of course, it does not include North Korea. And then we have the East Asia Summit, now is expanded to the ASEAN +8. So it's quite inclusive, but it doesn't have the same basis as APEC. It's ASEAN-driven and ASEAN-led. All the meetings are in ASEAN. It doesn't have North Korea, and I don't think it will have. We have the so-called +3, the China, Japan, South Korea meetings. Again, focused on economics, does not include North Korea. We have the six-party talks, does include North Korea, but that's a negotiation about a very specific issue. And so there's many limitations there. And as we've seen, it's off and on process because one country can stop the whole thing. And we have various second tracks, and that's where we've had actually the most progress, I think, in these second tracks. Now, I think if we use the word Helsinki, we're not likely to get anywhere because Helsinki is remembered actually as a process that really resulted in a lot of regime change in the socialist part of Europe. So I would kind of avoid that part as a model. So finally, what can Jeju do about it? Well, I think there's two kinds of, there's a choice. One is the World Economic Forum kind of choice, which is a big meeting every year, every 2 years. Now it's many meetings, but it's meetings without driving forward in some real specific way. Or you can have something like the organization that I co-chair, the Pacific Economic Cooperation Council, which started out as the APEC before there was an APEC, and that was the goal. It was a network organization rather than a single organization, and so it was focused on doing something, and it was adaptable, and it's become a second track to APEC now. Obviously, I think for an organization based in South Korea, North Korea is a very important part of the agenda, but there's great limitations, including, as you just pointed out, Chung-In, that you're hostage to South Korean politics. So to some extent, that suggests that maybe a network kind of approach may be good, so that at times when it's hard for North Koreans to go to South Korea, they can go to another part of the Jeju process that isn't even in Jeju. And finally, I have a little hobby horse myself, which is the forgotten region. The forgotten region, in my mind, is the North Pacific. It's a region that includes Canada and the United States. Some of our friends in Southeast Asia and in Australia and New Zealand won't be too happy about that region, but I think it's an important region. There are issues that need to be addressed, and it's small enough to do things, but large enough so it can't be dominated by one country.
Thank you very much. Professor Park Cheol-hee.
Thank you. I'm supposed to represent a Japanese perspective rather than as Korean. But I think possibly we missed former Foreign Minister Kawaguchi, but two things are good. One, Kawaguchi belongs to the LDP, which is not a ruling party anymore. And I'm Korean. I can be much more objective in analyzing Japanese problems. So having said that, I would say that I'm not that much overly pessimistic about the progress of the multilateralism in this region, in a sense that after the end of the Cold War, there's a kind of the multiple, the institutional framework have been developed in many forms. ASEAN Plus 3, East Asian Summit, the Six-Party Talks, and many other forms are developing. And another good sign is that China is quite proactively participating in all this framework, which has been, rather than stepping away from that framework, China is getting very actively participating in that formula, so which is a kind of very good sign. We have to work on many things to make a progress, but still I think it's a kind of I find it as a very, very good signal. First of all, I would say that Japan is not that much enthusiastic about the multilateral framework, frankly. And then it's not that much fascinated by the multilateral framework we have developed, even though Japan is participating in many formula. For example, China gives much more focus on the ASEAN Plus 3, actually, which includes the United States. But Japan has a tendency to add up more in the framework of ASEAN Plus 3, Plus 3, Plus 2, which are relatively the U.S. allies to the framework. So that's the reason why I think Japan gives more focus on East Asian Summit rather than ASEAN Plus 3, which is a slightly different focus between Japan and China. Also, in a security-wise, I think Japan is giving a focus on the U.S.-Japan alliance. Even though the former Prime Minister Hatoyama raised the flag of East Asian community, it was a flag without followers or contents. And then they came back to the U.S.-Japan alliance as a center pillar of Japanese diplomacy, and then tried to make a kind of a league of democracies like Australia, India, South Korea, and possibly some Southeast Asian countries are included, which means a kind of they don't say that. I would say that Japan is interested in encircling China. So it is clear if you read the kind of a National Defense Program guideline published in December 2010. Also, when it comes to the minilateralism, like a kind of six-party talks, still they participate in order to make an input in their voice into the framework, but still they are very much preoccupied with abductees issues, which is not a prime focus of that framework, but still they are very much interested in that. And then if available, any chances they wanted to put pressure on North Korea rather than engage North Korea, which is a kind of very distinctive phenomena that I find. And then throughout all this, the Japanese approach, I find a specific tendencies. One, in the Japanese eye, I would say that the U.S. should be an integral part of any kind of a multilateral framework. The mechanism, any multilateral mechanism that the U.S. is excluded, that Japan is reluctant to be jumping on that program actively. Also, Japan is not necessarily against China, but tries to engage the outer rim of China countries first, and then engage China. Especially when it comes to the security issues. So it's a kind of rather step-by-step fashion rather than wholeheartedly embracing the region. Also, another characteristic is that Japan takes much more functional approach, gives much more focus on the economic activities rather than try to separate economy and security and politics, and then keep much more focus on economy. I think from that perspective, I would say that Japan has to develop more creative ideas in developing the multilateral framework in this region. And the challenge, I would say, that is that first, whether Japan can tie up with the South Korea in many multilateral framework. This is a kind of strategic challenge for them. I think that especially the Khan administration and her current regime is thinking about it, but they have a kind of a hidden dilemma that how to resolve this historical and territorial dispute they have with South Korea. So this is a kind of a huge challenge for them. They cannot easily solve this problem. That when I attended a conference in Paris last week with the Japanese Ministry of Defense, and talking about all this strategic alliance, they said that I was commenting on this textbook issue, and then, I don't want to comment. The Japanese Ministry of Defense official said, I don't want to comment on my neighboring ministry, which is a very troublesome even for them. So how proceed with this kind of historical reconciliation is a challenge for them. Also, whether Japan can come up with an idea of mingling with China much more comfortably with the confidence-building measures is a kind of big challenge. I think I do not disagree with them in that China has multiple faces, like nationalist China, intimidating China, and accommodating China. They have all different faces. But I think we have to promote the face of accommodating China with other neighboring countries. So it's a kind of but I think Japan gives a kind of a China threat perception that's increasing, which is not necessarily good for the development of the multilateral framework here. Lastly, I would say that as Professor Pan they mentioned, I think Korea can play a very important role, and the Korean initiative is very important in many issues. North Korea issue, our issue, and then the coordinating role among the three nations. Korea can play a better role than other two countries, and in the regional framework, still Korea as a middle power can play a very active role in promoting the ideas of multilateralism. I will end it.
Thank you. What I will do is this. I'll be asking question each panelist, and then I will turn to the floor about for 10 to 15 minutes. Let me start with General Pan. If you heard the remarks by Ambassador Yoon, and Ambassador Yoon emphasized the importance of compatibility between bilateral alliance and multilateral security cooperation regime. What is your view? Do you agree with it? But when I met a lot of Chinese, they said, that's impossible. How bilateral alliance and multilateral cooperation can go together?
Well, I think I cannot speak for all the Chinese, so we are almost can find every sort of kind of view in China with regard to security issues. But I guess that our government or the mainstream view in China seem to have some sort of change on the role of security alliance in this region. Philosophically, I think the Chinese continue to reject this kind of value of security alliance, particularly in the post-Cold War era. However, as our government stated many times, bilateral security alliance, in fact, is just a kind of business between the two countries. So China may have that view, but it should not really have saying that it's right to say that you should not be allied with the third country. So I think that the Chinese perhaps are more open-ended. And in fact, I think that this is also because Chinese are becoming increasingly pragmatic. Even if you oppose it, they cannot disappear. And you have to be realistic that the security alliance has already become part of the security landscape in Northeast Asia. You like it or not like it, that doesn't matter much. And therefore, I think that if we acknowledge the role of the United States in this region for security reasons, and if we acknowledge that our neighboring countries like South Korea, like Japan, wanted to be allied with the United States, and we think that's their own right to do that. Our concern today is that these security alliances will not be used against our core security interests. Now, more specifically on the Taiwan issue. That is really our major concern. And you can see that to indicate some kind of change of our position. You could see some kind of proposals, even by the officials, that the Chinese would be happy to have a kind of a dialogue, you see, with the United States and Japan together. You see, or this is another way to suggest that the kind of a dialogue could be sort of, and that is between China and China, U.S., Japan, U.S. Secret Alliance.
Professor Simonia, you are the only pessimistic person in this group. It won't happen, okay? Community building in Northeast Asia. Realistic. Realists are always pessimistic, by the way. But what, General Pan, okay, and Ambassador Yoon, President Morrison, and Park Cheol-hee, they all pointed out South Korea can play a very important role in pushing for and steering the multilateral security cooperation regime. Do you buy that argument? You're always frank. If you don't make a diplomatic statement. Would you push?
Excuse me. I can't imagine that China agreed to be part of a multilateral securities regime in which also participates United States with military bases in Japan. Okinawa is full of American bases. In Seoul and some other parts of your country, in military help to Taiwan permanently going on. So I don't think I am a realistic person. And but can I add something? When I listened to Pan Tunja, General Pan, it reminded me that Jeju can really play a bigger role if they do efforts to involve North Koreans. Because I have my own experience, not my personal, but experience participating in such gatherings. For example, in Sapporo, Hokkaido Island, I participated 7 or 8 times in NORPAC, so-called NORPAC, and we finally decided that why not, we are not inviting North Korea. And then we started doing this. First was failure. Second, they sent from Osaka, Koreans from Osaka. But the third time, 2 gentlemen came from Pyongyang. So since then, they started. And also, they are participating in Niigata, in Arena institution. And I visited many times. Why your institute, Peace Institute, not engage in such a activity? Because Jeju must find its own niche. And it's not just the only process, peace process. So she must broaden its activity.
It's a very encouraging statement, okay? The multilateral security cooperation in Northeast Asia might not be feasible, but if the idea and policies are being shaped under Jeju Island, then there's a possibility, provided that we invite North Korea. That's a very important sign. I hope the journalists would make note of it. Then now, Ambassador Yoon, it is well known that you are working closely with Park Geun-hye, okay? It is reported, okay? Suppose if you become senior presidential advisor for national security and foreign policy, what kind of policy would you take on this issue? Multilateral security cooperation regime, 6-party talks, and whatever. It's hypothetical, you know.
Well, usually I don't speak on the basis of hypotheses or assumptions. But I think basically you have to make a distinction between track 1 and track 2 approaches. As far as the track 1 is concerned, I still think that from the standpoint of reality, still we have some time. We need some time. We have some way to go before invite North Korea as a member of regional security dialogue at this moment, especially while these nuclear issues doesn't have make any progress at all. But that does not mean that we simply sit by. And I think there are roles for track 1.5 or track 2, including Jeju process or NEACD, but especially the Jeju process is very important because indirectly there are many government officials participating in this process as well. And basically, I think this track 1.5 or track 2 process can contribute indirectly to track 1 process. The problem is this is rather time consuming. And whatever government is inaugurated in 2 years' time, I think there could be some continuity given the achievements made over the last several years. So, if we envisage several circles, in Northeast Asia, we have Korean Peninsula, then Northeast Asia, then East Asia. All these circles are actually reinforcing each other. From the standpoint of ASEAN, starting from ASEAN, ASEAN plus 3, ARF, EAS, then the Northeast Asia is a periphery. But from our standpoint, we start from Korean Peninsula, then Northeast Asia, then East Asia. But basically, these 2 big circles are reinforcing each other. And track 2, track 1.5 approaches are also supporting and reinforcing track 1 approaches. So, Professor Moon, don't be too discouraged by the lack of progress in these 6-party talks and some reduced attention to this Jeju process. But I think in due course, I think different atmospheres and the efforts like this could make some impact on track 1 process as well. But be patient. It will take quite some time.
Thanks. Charles. Okay, I think Professor Simonia made a very important point. He's a Russian third-party observer, okay, saying that, look, Americans have lots of military bases in South Korea, Japan, and etc. And how China and the U.S. can cooperate in this multilateral framework. General Pan says, yes, it is possible, but what is your take on that?
I not only think it's possible, I think it's essential. And I think the main thing is that in order to enter these multilateral processes, countries need to be secure in some way. And my impression is these bases and these alliances may not last forever, but for the moment they help Japan and Korea in their positive engagement in the rest of the region. So, what we once understood as alliance and what is an alliance today has changed a great deal. And in the post-Cold War era, these alliances are not really directed against anyone else. They're certainly not directed toward the Taiwan situation. But I think they do serve a psychological benefit in the sense of a secure order in the region that allows us to move forward in a cooperative multilateral framework. So that's the way I would see that.
Japan appears to be quite critical of 6-party talk processes. Okay, Japan doesn't want to be left out, joined it, but because of kidnapped Japanese issues, Japan has not been really being a leading member of 6-party talk processes. Okay, from Japanese point of view, is 6-party talk process dead or still alive? Well, is it possible to, resuscitate it as a mechanism not only solving the North Korean nuclear problem, but also facilitating the new security architecture in Northeast Asia?
I think the opinions are divided on that issue. But basically, as you say, Japan does not want it to be out of that process. They wanted to make a foothold in the framework and then raise their voice when necessary. But as I told you, that they are not that much enthusiastic about the process. And then the North Korea is looked as a kind of rogue nation for them, especially which abducted their own innocent citizens. So the dilemma for them is that even though they wanted to solve the abductees issue completely, if possible within the framework of six-party talks, other nations do not necessarily agree. And then even though they agree that it cannot be easily solved. So whether they can resolve that issue through other channels rather than put it on a bilateral or the multilateral framework, that's a kind of they should make a strategic decision about that. But I think many Japanese strategists agree that the six-party talks is a useful framework in the future, not at the moment. Anyway, you have to invent it. If there is no, I don't think Japan is regarded as dead. But they want to keep it. But the momentum of that, the resuscitating six-party talks comes from the inter-Korean dialogue and then U.S., the North Korean dialogue, rather than Japan taking an initiative on that issue. So still, if after all these things are going on, they wanted to jump on the ship and then go on with the six-party talks framework, because if not, they would be isolated from the framework. And then if I add one more point, that we shouldn't forget that between North Korea and Japan, there is a Pyongyang Declaration, very eloquently, very elaborated documents about how to proceed with the normalization. What they do not agree is a kind of how to solve abductees issues, how denuclearize the North Korea. So, but this issue should be resolved in a multilateral. Abductees issues should be dealt with in a bilateral way. But the nuclear issue should be dealt with in a multilateral way.
Ambassador Yoon and General Pan pointed out, on track one level, without resuscitation of six-party talk processes, it would be extremely difficult for us to deliberate on the multilateral security architecture in Northeast Asia. And track 2, track 1.5, Jeju process can play a very important role. But here, let me just ask, TJ Pempe raised this issue previous session, but let me ask each of you whether six-party talk has a chance to resume or it's dead. Just you tell me yes or no. I will start with the notary.
Yes, but the major
central
part of these negotiations will be dialogue between North Korea and United States. United States.
Yes, of course, as the initiator of six-party talks, we of course very much wish be resumed as soon as possible.
Ambassador Yoon?
Yes, there is a chance to resume the six-party talks because there is no better alternative right now. But even though we have resumed the six-party talks, we have a long way to go to dismantle this nuclear program, North Korean nuclear weapons.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, absolutely yes. Sorry, not Japanese perspective, your own personal view.
My perspective is that Korea's decision is very important. I think that current regime's North Korea policy is a principled disengagement, even though they say that it's a principled engagement. We have to take a position of a principled engagement.
I think the study package is a wonderful invent of new words. Wonderful invent of the new words. Now, principled disengagement is official doctrine of South Korean government. Anyhow, it's really positive, and I'm very happy to hear that all these panelists are saying that there is a chance for six-party talk process, even though there are some conditions attached. Okay. Now, then with this, let me turn to the floor. Any questions and comments? John Delary? Why don't you come this way?
Yeah, well, I would raise a question about the nature of the Jeju process. maybe even an existential question or a question of definition and distinctiveness. It seems to me it's not so much about building multilateral security architecture. That seems to be the wrong metaphor for the spirit of Jeju, at least. This is only my first, so my experience of it. Metaphorically, I'd say it's more about a network or a neighborhood is maybe better. So rather than building a house, this is about a neighborhood. So I strongly echo General Pan's proposition, and others have said, about involving North Koreans directly because they're neighbors. That's how a neighborhood works. You know, there's some folks in the neighborhood, on the block, you don't get along with as well, but you still invite them to the neighborhood party. But in a serious way, I think it's worth thinking about what could define the Jeju process, not just the forum, and also that it's less about the formality of security architecture. It's also not just focused on security. It includes security, but we have people here from business and culture, academia, and also it seems more a track 2 process, not track 1.5, in that while there's government representation, the people here seem happy, not so fixated on who's the government person in the room, enjoying the company of the diversity. So I think it's worth thinking about, and I'd like to hear more from the panel about what they see as the distinctiveness of the Jeju process and then how it can contribute to not just security problems, but including the security problems in Northeast.
Who wanted to volunteer? General Pan?
Yes, I think this is a very good question. I think Jeju process is important. This is really a very important value for communication and for confidence building measures. And I was very much impressed to see many business representatives, in fact, involved in this round of process. And I think this is a good sign that Jeju process perhaps also provide a kind of opportunity for another set of CBM, and that is common interest building measures. You see, when people are getting better understanding of each other, and when they could find an opportunity to work together for their common interests, and then I think these things themselves could constitute a kind of dynamics for cooperation. I think that is very important.
Any other comments? Yes, please. Would you identify yourself?
I am Ambassador Park from the Korean Foreign Ministry. Let me first compliment you, Mr. Coordinator, for the excellent chair, and all the other panelists for their very insightful observations, which represents different perspective of the issue. I fully associate myself with most of the thrust of the panelists' views. I agree that there are immediate obstacles for this multilateral security cooperation, which is North Korea, especially North Korean nuclear issue. And the more long-term challenge is how to view the United States role in this security architecture as a offshore balancer. And obviously, major stakeholders has different perceptions on the threat, and they have different priorities and maybe different prescriptions for their security. But I think I am one of those optimists. I see the situation as a half full than the half empty glass. So, and one point I really echo, agree with the panelists, is that we should not be held hostage by North Korean issue, especially North Korean nuclear issue, for moving on this, more long-term project, issue of the multilateral cooperation architecture. So I'm very much, encouraged to hear the views expressed by most of the panelists. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Very much, Ambassador Park. Charles?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on a previous question. It's important to understand that what we're about is not building a house. It's about building a neighborhood. And when we talk about security architecture, it's not a single organization. It is a series of interlocking and nesting kinds of institutions. And it's not simply about military security issues. The economic issues, the cultural issues, all impact on that. And so it is about building a community or building about a neighborhood. And it's also very important what the previous questioner just said, that one country not be allowed to hold that process hostage, which is why we need organizations that don't have North Korea, but we also need organizations that do have and do engage the North Koreans. And that's where I think Jeju plays a very critical role potentially right now, that if we cannot do at the governmental level this kind of a broad process outside of maybe a resumption at some point of this party talk. So Jeju is an important forum, I think, for engaging them. But at the moment, I don't see Jeju as a process. Jeju is a series of meetings. But I have not seen a continuity of vision and direction to it that would make it, in my mind, a process.
Thank you very much. Two-finger intervention by Park Cha-ri.
Just one comment. I fully agree with Ambassador Park and other the presenters here that we should not be preoccupied with North Korea only, because that is not the only question we deal with. But at the same time, I wanted to give a warning signal to the kind of the symptom-like kind of North Korean threat fatigue and North Korean negotiation fatigue. That's much more dangerous. That's our problem. It's not from the eyes of the United States and China still is a kind of neighbors, but this immediate partner we have to deal with. We should not feel the fatigue and the exhaustion about North Korean issue. Very dangerous.
Thank you very much. I discovered they're all my friends and my supporters. Anyhow, let me invite Satu.
Oh, I should just hear. Yes, any of the panelists, I appreciate your responses. Several people mentioned that the U.S. is critical to any community building project in the region. But let's think out 2 decades and suggest that U.S. alliances will alter in some way that will be less as they've been, and U.S. budget constraints and U.S. attentions will be less in this region. Let's raise that. What will that do to the community building project? Will it facilitate moving faster down that project, or will it undermine it? And the second question has to do with, you're all talking about architecture, and quite agreed. There's no one house. There's overlapping all kinds of things, Northeast Asia, EAS, et cetera. But I guess my question is, one thing that does seem to have happened structurally with multilateralism is that it has been functionally differentiated. EAS for top leaders, APEC for economics, ADMM for security, et cetera, et cetera. Even six-party talks is sort of in some ways functional before it becomes regional. What are the implications of such functional differentiation for management of overlapping architecture?
Oh, the Ambassador Yoon and Charles.
Okay. Actually, from second question first. Well, actually, for the last 20 years or 30 years, the most the conspicuous phenomenon is the proliferation of regional or sub-regional groupings. So in terms of management problems, actually, senior officials, including ministers, cannot afford to attend all these meetings. So that is one reason why, for the last several years, many people doubted U.S. President's attendance or participation in East Asia Summit. But now, after this President Obama took over, he decided to join this EAS. So now U.S. is now supposed to attend this EAS meeting from this year. And this gives a very good signal to our discussion in the region, because you may remember this Prime Minister Martinez's the intention to exclude the United States for many years, since during the mid-90s. Then, at the end of the day, now United States is now willing and ready to contribute in their own way to this regional integration. And EAS, with Russian and American participation, are supposed to be a very important driving force for regional integration. So regardless of the budget problem, regardless of the debate within the United States, I think this is a very positive signal on the part of the United States. Secondly, that also applies to the remarks made by General Pan. I think in terms of inclusiveness, any regional or sub-regional grouping should be aimed at open regionalism. So APEC, in which I was involved in very closely in creating, was very much open regionalism oriented. So ARF, same. Maybe sub-regional grouping in Northeast Asia should aim at that inclusiveness, as General Pan said. Okay.
Mr. Yun, okay, now time is almost up. Okay, we'll take one more question or comment from Professor Wang Yong of Beijing University, and then I'll give a final, 20 seconds each.
Thank you. Mine is mainly the question. Okay, as Dr. Morrison mentioned, I think very important the fact. Okay, in the past, the North Korea has been excluded for the major regional mechanism. I think that is a very important thing. So I think that how to deal with North Korea, okay, should be the key of the developing any regional security mechanism. So I wanted to know more what what the factors leading to these exclusions of North Korea, and how to how possible to get them involved in this process.
Okay, I'll ask each of you. Is it possible to engage with North Korea? Yes, no.
Yes.
Yes, General Pan.
No, you must pardon me. I'll just try to elaborate just more than just one yes or no. Well, I think you should understand that North Korea's threat perception is also shaped by what it perceives as a kind of a threat from outside. And therefore, the question how to regard North Korea, my answer is, don't ask what North Korea is going to do, but just ask us what we can do for North Korea, because that really shapes their threat perception.
Well, actually, it's not regional countries who excluded North Korea from regional mechanism. It is of their own deed. But nevertheless, whatever they did, we are open. I mean, regional countries should be open to engage them in any regional or sub-regional mechanism for the sake of the regional prosperity and peace.
Please learn from Dr. Simonia. Yes or no? Okay. Yes. Yes. Dr. Morrison?
Yes, I thought that.
Professor Park?
Yes, but in engaging North Korea, I think United States, Japan, Korea should smile. Russia and China should be angry.
Okay, anyway, thank you very much. I think that we have learned the three important issues here. One is, despite all the obstacles, multilateral security cooperation framework could be viable. Second, in doing that, six-party talks should be resuscitated. And then we should make every effort to engage with North Korea so that North Korea can be productive and a normal member of Northeast Asian community. When those three conditions, in order to create those three conditions, Jeju process should continue with more sharply defined visions, needs, and other content. I will conclude this session with those remarks. Thank you very much. Let us give a big applause.